Hello! Welcome back to Are You Experienced? I'm Joe from Conveyor, and in this episode I sit down with Wendy Heimann-Nunes. Wendy is co-founder and co-managing partner leading the location-based Immersive and Experiential Entertainment group at the specialist IP and entertainment law firm Nolan Heimann. We talk about what sparked her passion for experiential and track how it's moved from the sidelines of entertainment to the strategic core of brand and community building. We also tackle the harder commercial questions. Why is immersive still capital constrained? Why investors struggle without clear metrics, and how greater rigor and shared standards could unlock growth without reducing creativity. You'd be hard pressed to find anyone as passionate, knowledgeable and future facing than Wendy when it comes to the experience economy. And it was a real privilege to get to spend an hour hearing how she sees changing face of our industry. I really hope you enjoy as much as I did. On with the show. Wendy, hi. Welcome to Are You Experienced?
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. Thank you for taking the time. Thanks for joining. So we're going to hopefully get through some based on your background and your experience, and another really unique perspective that we haven't had on the show before. So I'm very eager to dive into some sort of meaty topics later on, but you know, you've had such a fascinating path through the entertainment industry. So walk us through your career journey and, you know, any sort of pivotal moments along the way.
Well, because I've been focused on a certain genre of entertainment for so long, you'll have to bear with me because the relevant aspects of my history go far back. So I'm going to go way back. We're going to go in a time machine right now. Honestly, my interest in the experiential domain really started in 1985, when I was merely a twinkle in my parents' eyes. No, I was in college. I'd like to believe I'm that young, but I was in college. And I took a class. I was a speech major, and it was a rhetoric class, and it was called The Rhetoric of Contemporary Culture. And what we did is analyze modern environments and assessed how they persuade. Essentially, that was the nature of the class. I'm really boiling it into the most simplistic terms. And it woke me up to what I call environmental storytelling. It woke me up to this notion that, as you know, as a communications major, I spent so much time focusing on the dialogue with an individual, or even an audience, a stagnant audience where it's just your message to them, and then maybe a dialogue, maybe it's their message back, right? This class all of a sudden blew out the framework for me thinking about persuasion, because we analyzed every element in an environment. And when I say environment, I don't just mean a physical environment. I actually mean reality. Like, every element in our reality that can be used to persuade someone to a certain behavior, a certain thought, whatever. And that's when the power of 360-degree storytelling, 360-degree persuasion really captured my heart as a thought, as a theoretical kind of canvas. As you know, the dork in me, the academic dork in me, was just really fascinated by it. So fast forward, I always loved supporting creatives. When I was even in college, my friends were the creatives and I was more of the behind the scenes, let's try to make this successful and launch it, whatever type person. And I was a talent agent very briefly after college, but I really wanted a more candidly, intellectually rigorous profession. No offense, talent agents out there. So I went to law school in part to be more intellectually challenged, but also, if I'm honest, and this goes out to the women listeners, I was always younger looking, and back in the 90s or 80s and 90s as a woman, to be taken seriously was an effort, especially if you had a certain look or personality, you know, it dismissed a lot of credibility. And so I went to law school because I thought, you know what, if I can go to a good law school and get a law degree, no one will ever think I'm dumb. Or at least not my IQ, they won't think is bad. You know, they might think I'm dumb for other reasons. I really never planned on practicing law. For me, it was a means to an end. When I was in law school, I got introduced to the concept of intellectual property, um, which really fascinated me because I thought to have something intangible that is like a gas that can fill a space as big as you can build it was so fascinating to me. And then also um, monetizing intellectual property and thinking how you deal with it and all this stuff. It just, for me, intellectually, it really captured my heart. So I knew that as a young lawyer, I wanted to focus on intellectual property, but I still had that creative desire in me. And then coupled with the more immersive 360-degree aspect of entertainment, I got drawn to theater. So I was very supportive of the theater community in Chicago, such that there's a landmark theater in Chicago called the Chicago Theater. Those of the listeners that are from the Midwest would know it. It's on State Street in Chicago. And I was asked to be the executive director as we reorganized it out of bankruptcy and tried to resurrect it. And couldn't pass the job up, took the job. And again, another really amazing moment in building a career. It just so happened that the mayor of Chicago was interested in revitalizing the North Loop area of Chicago. It was blighted economically, and my theater was smack in the middle of it. So the perception was that the Chicago Theater could be an anchor for urban renewal. Right about that same time, Disney was acquiring real estate and getting into mixed-use real estate development. So when I was at the Chicago Theater, the New Amsterdam Theater in Times Square was purchased by Disney. They started building more around Times Square, and the mayor was interested in replicating that model in Chicago. So we had discussions with Disney, and at a ridiculously young age, I got a chance to meet Mike Ovitz and really understand where Disney's head was at in terms of brand expansion. And all of a sudden, that triggered this interest in me of, wait a second, you mean storytelling can take part in a massive scale across real estate, across urban environments? So that completely changed my thinking and expanded my thinking, such that when my husband was finishing up his PhD and looking for a school to teach at, when he was able to get a job at USC, I jumped at it, moved out to LA. All my friends thought, okay, LA, television, film, for sure. And what did I do? I went into theme parks. And we're like, what the hell? You know, you moved from the Midwest to LA so you could be in theme parks. But it was theme parks was such a perfect illustration of storytelling in a fully in a 360-degree environment across a large amount of square footage. And so the task of moving people through a space in a persuasive, compelling way, what better application than the theme park industry? And so that's where my career has resided for the last 30 years, 25 years, is in the mixed use location-based entertainment space. And then since you've asked me to kind of highlight points in my career that really were impactful, the next point that really impacted my vision and where I was going with my career was when I was in-house at Universal. So I worked at Universal Studios at Universal Creative, which is the division that conceives and builds and executes all the attractions and resorts worldwide. When I was there, I got to see the tools that the creatives were using in order to create these experiences. And I saw, because this was in the late 1990s, early 2000s, at the advent of the internet, I started seeing the proliferation of digital tools and higher tech kind of tools that could be used in creating these immersive environments. And a point that really turned me was the Minority Report. The Steven Spielberg, Tom Cruise movie came out, and I think it was 2002. And being at Universal, Spielberg was a Universal person. I knew he was employing legit futurists and scientists and developing and doing the production design and whatnot for the movie. So when I saw it, I was like, holy crap, this isn't too far in the future. Augmented reality, mixed reality, all that stuff is just around the corner. And I think I knew that not just because I surmised if Spielberg was referencing it, it's going to happen, but I was witnessing it in-house at Universal, like the proliferation of this kind of technology and the thought behind using it. And that's when I got really excited because I was like, wow, the tools that we'll have available to ourselves to create these environments is just going to be crazy. And then on top of that, so it was the tools being available. On top of that, because of the advent of the internet, I was watching certain business models in entertainment and traditional domains really be in free fall, much like what's kind of happening right now with AI. It was this feeling of, holy crap, I'm not going to be able to make any money anymore. This is going to take me out. What do I do? And so it got me really interested in how can what I do be applied to traditional sectors, traditional service providers and whatnot, and helping them pivot away from what I thought was going to be areas that were going to struggle. So, for example, retail, my thinking back 20 some odd years ago was, well, if I can buy the exact shirt I want in the exact color and have it delivered to me without having to schlep to a store, why wouldn't I do that instead of go to a store? Hence, what's going to happen to retail? And where's retail going to be? So I just started seeing these reasons why experiential entertainment was going to start to matter. And then
Mm.
also consumer. So you've got the advent of technology, you've got the business models in entertainment and other markets upside down, and then consumer demand. I don't know if you're familiar with the Experience Economy, Joe Pine's book.
Hmm. Yeah.
That was another real amazing pillar of my career when I read his book and realized the economic impact of experiences. And I just started, I became a believer, and I thought, the economic value of providing compelling experiences is going to continue to increase, which means my area, the Carneyville, the people that were thought of as churros and Dippin' Dots, what we do is going to matter. So all of these things made me say, okay, there's a there for me as an attorney and as a business advisor. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to really lean in and differentiate myself. I guess the last thing I'll say is supply and demand. I was noticing there were no attorneys that even thought about this space or knew it was a thing or anything. And I thought, it's not a bad pond to swim in when you're the only fish. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and so it was a little opportunistic as well because when you want to be successful, differentiating yourself is critical. And so that was my point of differentiation. So I love what I do. I love the world in which I navigate, the creatives that I work with, the developers I work with, the business people. They want to create magic for people in a way that matters. And the last thing I'll say, and then forgive me, Joe, I'll turn it over to you, is what I'm really happy about is, I'm at a stage of life where you start thinking, does what I do matter in more than just am I making money or other people making money sense? And because sometimes you can ask yourself, especially in entertainment, like, why did I do that? Like, why didn't I become a pediatric oncologist and save some young kids' lives? You know what I mean? Like, do something that really matters. And what I really love about what we do in our industry is we create moments of bringing people together,
Hmm.
forcing people out of their homes into community. And community now more than ever is so essential for so many reasons: mental health, societal health, things like that. And we offer things oftentimes in an intergenerational way. So not only are we building community, but we're doing it cross generations, which is critical for people's well-being and society's well-being. So I don't want to sound like I've completely smoked something, um, but I do believe that there's a higher purpose in uh location-based and experiential. I really do. And of course, I believe it's a lucrative and growing field. So
Yeah.
I'm not doing it just for that reason.
So, I mean, it sounds like or you're almost too early, right, in terms of some of those predictions perhaps that are now coming to
Well, I've been too
fruition.
early my entire career. I have. I mean, I would be a much more successful, wealthier individual if I wasn't so 10 years ahead. And I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
saying
yeah.
it arrogance. I'm saying that out of complete and utter frustration. My
Yeah.
my my goal is to try to speed things up so I don't die before things really
Yeah,
become
yeah.
the way
But
I want them to.
yeah, but like you say, it feels like all of the stuff that you're saying there really resonates because you know, the internet did disrupt everything, but arguably from a kind of in-person, you know, IRL entertainment perspective, it had the opposite effect, right? Which is that it made the, you know, we talk about competition with the couch, right, a lot, and it's really the internet that created that competition or made that competition so um, intense. But it feels like with AI, almost the opposite is true. And as the internet becomes sloppier, and people crave those in-person experiences, community, I think, is incredibly important because it does feel like we've lost something. We've lost that kind of, you know, in the UK, it would be thousands of pubs closing every year, and as people are kind of rooted to home entertainment and things like that, and you're losing some of these third spaces. And so I totally buy what you're saying around, you know, the power of community and
Yeah,
what.
if I could, I want to be a little more sophisticated in the discussion about community because uh, I think anyone listening who may have kids, my children are in their late teens, early 20s, and they were of the generation where for a while my husband and I thought they didn't have friends
Uh,
because they never left the house. They never had friends over. And it was like, oh, what's going on? Our kids don't have friends. But we learned that they had tons of friends. They had friends all over the place. They were just playing with online. That is a community. I mean, we talk about
yeah.
online community. So I don't want to disparage the community building that happens online. I think that physical presence with one another, and I don't want to get too hippy dippy, but oxytocin, you know, feeling, touching, being in the same space, there are those benefits that we lose through just a digital world. And then the other thing I want to underscore is I'm really bullish about the digital world. I don't want people to think I disparage it. I actually think what we're growing towards and what I'm super excited about and working on some things in is the intersection of digital and physical. I think where we're heading is, again, maybe I'm a little too advanced, but from a commercial standpoint, but I think we've been talking about phygital for so many years, and I think that's really where we're going. I think we're going to be living in a world that's merged physical and digital in ways that we uh, that just become part of our daily lives, a la Minority Report, a la, you know, so
Mm,
many other futuristic things we've seen. Um, and I think the beauty of that is, for example, I'm working on with some clients now on uh, using in-home digital to increase capacity for physical spaces, right? Because physical spaces only have so many people you could get through. If you could have people dial in, it expands your market. But what it also does is it increases access. Uh, Traveling now, if anyone out there is listening and has ever been to um, a major tourist site, Paris, certain places in Italy, you almost can't go anymore because it's just too crowded. And so I think using the internet to connect us to those spaces, or people who just simply don't have the money or don't have the physical wherewithal, I think we're going to have a really interesting convergence of what we consider space.
mm.
And that's when it's going to get super cool because we're going to be designing for a combined physical and digital space.
Yeah, super interesting. I think the obvious domain for that kind of stuff, and again, it's something that I think a lot about just because it's a sort of pet subject of mine. But sports obviously is the one that springs to mind there, as you know, a stadium is a finite um, uh, finite space, but it's also the kind of so critical to the identity of a sports club, and I'm thinking mainly about kind of Premier League football, but the amount of strategic thinking and spending and investment that's happening in growing global fan bases, right? For a club that is ostensibly a kind of a community asset for a small regional town in in the UK, but they're trying to grow this giant global fan base. How do you kind of allow people to participate in that, you know, that kind of headquarters experience, if you like? And what you're talking about there, I think, is really interesting. Even I guess there's a bit something in the middle. There's not necessarily people at home, but you've got things like Cosm in LA where you have these. I've only seen pictures because I'm over here in the English countryside, but that just seems incredible. Some of the images I'm seeing of people in stadium seating, to all intents and purposes, are there on the touchline of the match while it's kind of happening somewhere else. So it feels like there's so much opportunity there, in sport in particular.
There's a ton of opportunity, and the other thing is, so let me throw one other data point out there in my history, which underscores the opportunities going forward. The smartphone completely changed our industry, and the reason is, and this kind of gives us a little insight into brand building, because when you talk about sports teams in this way, what you're really talking about is brand building, right? Building your community of people
Exactly.
who love your brand, right? When I first started in the industry, the challenge was the per capita spend for each guest. And what I mean by that is, let's say entertainment aside, let's say I wanted to use experiences as part of brand building. The earlier stage of my career, people in marketing and brand strategy could not get their head around spending money in experiential because we were an impression-based world.
Mm-hmm.
The ad model was, how many people are going to see this? How many impressions?
Mm-hmm.
And how many impressions? How can I drive my investment down per impression? When you think about physical, location-based out-of-home entertainment, before the smartphone, you weren't getting that many impressions, and your cost per guest was really high. And so you were relying on word of mouth so that any guest that experienced it would go to their friends and say, "Holy shit, have you been to the new Nike store?"
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of the investment that companies thought they were making. All of a sudden, the smartphone came out, social media emanated, and it was a game changer because branding people realized. Do you mind if I swear, Joe? I have such a bad mouth.
No, it's fine. Go for it.
It's funny, your show is AYE, and it's like my second language is pirate, like sailor, pirate. I'm like, I have the worst mouth ever. But people in branding and marketing started saying, holy shit, we could have guests go through this, and every time they take a photo and put it on Facebook, this is back in the Facebook days, how many impressions are we getting? How can we even quantify that? I mean, the whole influencer world didn't exist until the last 15 some odd years. So the business model of experiential changed because brands now find it completely worthwhile to invest in these experiences because it's not just about the internal ROI for the experience itself. It's about the mass scale of talking about these things,
Mm.
and what it does for a brand. And now you've got situations where we went through a phase where these things were being built for that. I'm sure people remember not that long ago, the museums, I won't name any specific names, that were really Instagram experiences
Yeah.
where they were for the purposes of getting young people on Instagram talking about it. And so imagine my career arc. I start pre-internet where theater's theater, getting a
Mm.
theme park ticket is getting a theme park ticket, and that's about it, to now where you've got this physical, digital breadth of opportunity and experiential that
Mm.
completely leaves the opportunity wide open. And that's what we're still dealing with and trying to wrangle.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, that's a question that I was really keen to ask you from um, a contracting perspective, really, from like doing IP licensing deals in experiential. Do you feel like that's being captured, that kind of long-term opportunity versus from what I understand, it seems like ticket sales and kind of, you know, participating in the commercial revenue of that specific show or experience or whatever tends to be what these agreements are built around. But do you feel like there's scope for, you know, factoring in long-term outcomes into those agreements, you know, on the IP owner's side, so the building of that brand through the experience, as a way to shift those contracts and deals?
Yeah, it's really fun for me to be I love licensing. I do a lot of it. It's the mainstay of what I do, although I do a lot of other things, but licensing is a huge part of my business, both on the IP front and then on the developer front, the creator front. Um, and what I've seen it over the years, it's becoming much more sophisticated. Um, when I first started doing licensing, it was really just about uh, ticket sales. Um, really the mindset of the licensor was very much Universal does it, Disney does it, I feel like I should do it kind of thing. There wasn't a lot of sense of um, why I should do it, or it was just this weird pressure of other people are doing it, I should start exploring it and do it. Then it started proving out to these brands, these IPs, that they needed it as brand extension, not just as a financial upside, but as a brand loyalty and community building upside. I love representing licensees in deals because usually they're the little guys against the behemoth IPs. And the IPs, obviously, they want to maximize revenues. But I always say to my clients when I'm on the licensee side is, not many people create these experiences, and you're bearing all the development risk. And the brands need you. They can't do this themselves. They need you. And so this has to be structured really more as a partnership as opposed to how much money can I make off this. I think I think we're still trying to figure out, though, the true value of these relationships and how to maximize them both from a revenue standpoint and a brand impact standpoint. And I think that's really where so much um, innovation is going to occur, is how we get more sophisticated in determining not just uh, the business structure of these deals, but what should brands actually be doing? What type of experience should they be encouraging these developers to design? We lived through pre-COVID, that boom of projection mapping experiences, and everyone got super excited because it was a technology a lot of people weren't exposed to. But at the end of the day, it was a little bit of a flash to some degree, and I think it's because it was a spectacle. It was exciting for people to see, but it didn't leave them with a lasting impact necessarily. Um, but then when you look at design like that emanates from Disney, for example, I still remember my first visit to Disneyland, and there was no projection mapping, and there were ridiculous robotics that were hardly realistic. But there was something about the way the experience was designed that it never left me. And so I experienced design is going to get much more sophisticated, and we're going to be able to not just match brands to geographic areas or markets or types of experiences in a more macro way that appeal to their market, but we can, I think, and should get more sophisticated in the design of those experiences.
Mm.
Uh, that's just my thinking, but again, I think like any industry that evolves. It just gets more and more sophisticated. And by having done this for so long, I love the fact that we're getting more sophisticated and we're attracting people who never cared anything about this industry, who literally thought of it as Carnival. No one ever wanted to talk to me at cocktail parties. They did when they heard I was an entertainment attorney, but then when they found out that I did theme parks, water parks, family entertainment centers, and stuff like that, they moved on. And
Yeah.
now it's just the opposite. And it's
Yeah.
so gratifying and exciting.
I bet it is. I mean, the ultimate validation is that, I guess, is that the new Disney CEO is a theme parks guy, right? So he's come out
Totally.
of
Totally. And
the
let's
theme
not
park
forget,
division.
it's a cash business. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a really, it's a difficult business. It's a complex business, which I think is why it's been slow um, to grow compared to other industries. But I think it's really a cool industry. And the other thing, Joe, I'll say is the definition of location-based and experiential is grown dramatically, because I know people now who used to just do theme park work who are now building cities,
Mm,
because even urban planning and city design and whatnot, people are understanding the importance of a 360-degree experience
mm,
in building a city.
mhm.
Same with retail. Retail now, if you're building a retail business and you're not thinking in this way, you could have a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it comes back to that, what you said at the very start around, if you're competing purely on a place to transact on a new shirt, then you're going to lose to online shopping, right? But it has to have an experiential element to it. Um, in order to compete, you're so right. Yeah, we had Mel McGowan from Storyland um, uh, on the show a few weeks ago, and that was incredible, fascinating conversation just to see how obviously that was a business born out of and still very involved in the world of theme parks, but some of the projects they're working on are so far beyond the world of location-based entertainment and much more in that kind of um, almost city planning type space. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, architects, the sentiment of architects and architecture firms now is expanding. They don't just think of it as building a physical space. They think of it as building a living experience with human interaction in a much more sophisticated way. So the good news for me in my industry is there's more opportunity for people. Years ago, you built rides,
Mm,
and now there's just so much more opportunity
yeah,
for people who understand the industry.
yeah, super interesting. So the immersive as a sector, immersive entertainment is uh, exploding. There's more and more projects, more and more of these IP crossovers launching. Particularly, I feel that particularly in London, where I spend a lot of my time. It seems like a real hub for it. Um, but obviously, with that growth comes growing pains, and we've kind of touched on a few of those. But from your fairly unique vantage point across operators
Money,
and other,
money, money,
yeah,
money, capital, money, 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 money. Anyone
right,
out there is in private equity, venture capital, investment banking, call me, please, because
okay,
that is the problem, Joe,
just a
is
lack of capital,
we have to drive the risk of investment down.
right?
And from my vantage point, that is the biggest problem, is that people are still reluctant to invest in this space for many reasons. Some of which is it's a questionable investment. In other words, they don't have a way of measuring success. And that gets into some of the stuff you and I talked about offline. Is I think the more scientific we can get in the industry. For example, years ago I approached Nielsen Entertainment. Years ago.
Mm.
when I was dealing with this impression stuff, where I was talking to investors and they wanted to know how many impressions, blah, 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 blah. And I said to the guys at Nielsen, can we create a system to measure this industry? Because when you look at the rating system, it provides people with some science behind the industry, right?
Yeah.
And when you don't have measures, it's very difficult to free up it's very difficult for people to think that you're designing and developing against something measurable or that you're using something measurable in your design, right? And I think the more sophisticated we can get as creators in the industry, uh, the more we can apply science to it. I think it'll help investors feel that it's less of a shot in the dark. I mean, it's entertainment, right? So it's always going to be a little bit of a shot in the dark. But just like sentiment analysis that happens in movies and stuff, I think the more sophisticated we can get in this regard, I think it'll help free up capital a little bit. But right now, everyone's struggling in the industry because capital is not robust.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I mean, obviously, as you know, that's kind of why we exist. My business Conveyor is to kind of hopefully bring some of that strategic rigor to, first of all, testing concepts and helping de-risk some of that initial capital expenditure and investment, but in particular to hopefully kind of one day provide that sort of currency that you're talking about, the sort of trading currency for experiences. That's where we love to get to. My background before Conveyor is in audience measurement and insight for more traditional media. And you're absolutely right. That is what's lacking. Even on the kind of the experiential marketing side and the brand experience side, you've mentioned Nielsen there, these kind of TV ratings, and every other medium has a kind of a currency, an established trading
Exactly.
currency where it's where people can, however however good it is, people are singing from the same hymn sheet. They're saying, okay, we accept that this is how this medium is measured and we are going to trade on these numbers. And that's really kind of what's missing, I think, is that kind of coherent single source of truth, in inverted commas, of how you measure the impact of a campaign or an experience.
Yeah, and then when you can measure in a more sophisticated way, your historical data becomes that much more substantive and meaningful because you have real information, right? The feedback loop starts to really enrich the product, and the more enriched the product, I would imagine, on the part of capital, the more confident they'll feel in certain strategic decisions made or certain design decisions and stuff like that.
Exactly, 100%. And the idea is not, what you don't want to do is end up with the tail wagging the dog, like you've mentioned already, the kind of the sort of dark ages of advertising that we've been through in the last the last sort of 10-15 years, where the rise of social media and things like that. One thing that has done is the sort of cult of performance marketing, and everything has to be trackable and measurable, and attributable to the absolute most granular level it can be, rather than this kind of there's a company called System One who talk about this idea of salesmanship versus showmanship in advertising. And we've lived through an era of almost exclusively performance based advertising, so how many clicks and kind of likes and shares and things like that can I get, rather than the pendulum's now swinging back towards this idea of brand advertising and using entertainment and emotion and storytelling to kind of bring people on a journey rather than just get them to click and convert.
I'll tell you, if anyone wants an example of the power of storytelling, did you watch the Super Bowl halftime show?
Yes. Yeah.
I cried on multiple levels, on
Yeah.
multiple levels. But one of the reasons why I was so moved is because, from my vantage point, Rock Nation, Jay-Z's company, and I can't think of the director's name. He's actually a British director. Their ability to tell a story, and I'm sure Bad Bunny obviously was involved in his creative, tell a story at so many levels that translated both in the stadium, at home, and then the campaign around it. It's a masterclass, I think, in storytelling. And the thing that would be really interesting would be to do a deeper dive in the sentiment analysis. Why, first of all, is my impression that people are remembering it for an insane amount of post-presentation time? Is that accurate? I think it is, but I'm a data point of one on social media. But also, what was it about it? How was it executed where it had such an impact on people? And it's more than the politics, although the politics helped a lot. It's more than the politics. There was something in the way the whole thing was designed, and maybe they stepped into some of it. I don't know if you know that the bushes, the vegetation were people. Did you
Yeah,
know that?
yeah, I did.
And
Yeah, I
that
see a lot of people sharing images of themselves as
genius. I don't think they walked into it as geniuses. I think that was a function of a couple things, production issues, constraints. And then also, I understand, I don't know if this is true, that Bad Bunny had some bodyguards sprinkled in there because he was so concerned. I don't know if that's true. But so there were reasons for it but so I don't know that they designed it with the after intent or after effect in mind. But I could go on and on about that halftime show, and it's a masterclass from my perspective in at home, out of home integration, storytelling, narrative. But it's if you could measure that, and if you could start to really understand how that's done, imagine how advanced the industry can get.
yeah, and there's 100%. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier as well, right? About taking an in stadium experience and making it as good, at least as good at home. That sort of
I felt
feeling.
like I was there, and I
Yeah,
felt like I was watching something that I would have paid to watch
yeah, yeah,
at home.
yeah. In isolation, you mean just the halftime show as a,
Yeah.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was so well designed from a narrative standpoint,
Mm,
and from a technology standpoint, because designing for simultaneous live and mediated, uh, entertainment is really hard,
mm,
and so it's fascinating. I'm gonna see how long the halo effect continues, 'cause I'm on social media and I'm still hearing about it. Now, of course, it might have been lightning in a bottle because of the politics of it, but I still think there was something about it itself that was remarkable.
I think it's like you say, it's difficult to disentangle the two because it's um, so perfectly set up in both of the in the political climate. But also, as you say, as an artist, but I mean, he won the best album Grammy, which is another kind of major cultural moment. The week before, I think, and so yeah, no, it was a fascinating cultural moment for sure. That cuts across all sorts of different planes. Yeah,
Yeah. I can't stop thinking about it and talking
yeah.
about it. Forgive me for putting Bad Bunny into your podcast.
No worries. No, my sister will be very pleased. She's an early adopter for sure of reggaeton in general, but Bad Bunny in particular. So we're coming to the end of our time, but I'm just going to ask one more question, which is around, we're starting to see purpose-built immersive districts like Area 15 in Vegas, and obviously Immerse London. We had Damien Norman from Immerse London on the show a few weeks ago, as well as the kind of more temporary pop-ups and sort of short-run shows in more traditional venues, let's say. Do you think that seems to be, a reaction or a solution to some of the kind of the capital issues that that exist. Do you expect the immersive industry to head more towards that kind of permanent location based model, or like kind of mini theme parks effectively, or do you think that kind of flexibility and temporary activation will remain dominant?
Um, Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not in real estate deeply, and in fact, I have someone you could interview if you wanted to, who
Right.
is focusing on real estate in this domain. So I don't know the frontline vibes as to
Yeah.
where real estate developers' heads are at, where capital's at, but just anecdotally, I think there's a place for both. I think, um, I I I think that the proliferation of what we think of as experiential venues is gonna grow, but that's because the definition I use to talk about experiential is broad, so I'm including retail in that. Uh, I think it all comes down to the business model and what's sustainable. So, um, I think the Area 15s of the world are a really interesting business model, which make complete sense to me, which is driven by the fact that these smaller experiences, it's hard for them to lease. It's hard for them to lease because traditional spaces, leasing to the experiential world, it's different than leasing to retail. So
Mm.
it's hard, I think, for these pop-up places to find a s- a big enough, an appreciable enough venue, a distribution channel. I think of real estate, and it's talked about by some folks in my industry as a distribution channel. It's how
Yeah.
we distribute the content, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of discussion right now in how to build out that distribution uh, channel. And I think one of the early answers or experiments is places like Area 15, where they say, okay, we're going to create our own distribution channel by creating these areas, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Like a
I
shopping mall for retail,
e
previously.
exactly. I think that we're gonna see that. I wouldn't put bets on whether we're gonna like, the pace of proliferation of it and whatnot. Um, I don't think it's gonna forestall, though, the general touring and the pop-ups and things like that. Um, I think we're in a very fluid state with respect to this kind of real estate. Um, I think the more black box we can build things to be, the better. Because the problem, I think, from a distribution standpoint is there's only so much you can do in these spaces. They're not designed necessarily for what we can do to create experiences. I think the more black box venues we have established around the world, the more of a distribution channel we have for this type of
Mm.
innovation. I don't know, the distribution channel for this stuff, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Mm.
Um, Real estate's a very expensive investment.
Yeah.
So that, Joe, I don't feel fully equipped to answer that with certainty.
No, well,
Uh,
I think that is the answer, right? It's not there isn't a lot of certainty. I don't think that you can have, but I like that framing of it as a distribution channel, because I think repeat visits is such a key component of the success or failure of these things, or repeatability, or whatever you want to call it. So having a district like that makes sense, but also having like you say, a kind of black box format that you can cycle through different pieces of content, I think makes a ton of sense. A platform effectively for
Totally.
distributing these
We
these
just had
things.
an event that we, held. It was a presentation and networking thing that the firm produced, and we used our local cinema, as a venue, and when I was there presenting, I thought, "My god, these mini theaters, what are we gonna do with them? What are we gonna do with them?" So, I think there are spaces that we can rethink the way they're used,
Mm,
and I think we're gonna see more and more of that. I think the dome world is
yeah.
percolating. And so I think the spaces we inhabit as humans are going to really change over time. But
Mm,
again, I think we're at the early stage of this stuff. I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like, but I think there's room for everything.
yeah, super interesting. Okay, look, we've come to the end of our time, so I'm going to leave you with one final question, which is I asked to everyone, which is very short and a little bit opportunistic on my side. But who should I interview next, and what should I ask them about?
My gosh, I wish I was prepared for this question. You know, I in terms of capital, I'm really a capital freak right now because we can't do anything without money. And it's funny, I realize this doesn't translate across the pond. I said to people in London while I was there, it's all about the Benjamins. And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? So I don't know how that would translate. What do you say? It's all about the kings? I don't know
Yeah.
who's on your currency at this point.
Yeah, I don't
But
know. They're all about the Benjamins. That would that word. That's the phrase that I know. I think it
you
was.
know
I
it?
mean,
Okay.
I think
I
it
think I
was a
think
song
there are a
at one
couple
point in the
capital
90s.
folks. Pardon me?
I think there was a song in the 90s or noughties all about the Benjamins.
Uh, I was a mere infant then, I wouldn't know. Um, so I think there's a gentleman in investment banking that could be interesting
Yeah.
because I think folks in our industry, we tend to be so focused on either the tech or the creative. I love the fact you're asking about real estate and whatnot, because there's a whole business infrastructure that is building around these things and is essential, right? And I think interviewing my friend who's an investment bank, who's one of the leads of the out-of-home entertainment section of the investment bank, I think that could be really interesting. What are the drivers, the financial and investment drivers in this space?
Yeah. I'd
That would
love
be
to.
really.
I'd love to. We can connect offline and hopefully I'd love an intro if he's or
Yeah,
she.
his name is Adam, and if he's listening, Adam, I'm sorry, I've looped you into podcast madness.
Okay, well, I'm not going to force him into it. Don't worry. But yeah, that'd be a fascinating take that we haven't had before. So yeah, I'd love that.
Oh, and I really appreciate it, Joe. I'm rabid about what I do. I'm rabid about the people I support and the developments that I help bring to life. And the more light we can shed on how awesome this aspect of the industry is, the better. So I really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Well, I appreciate it. That comes through in spades. So that's it's clear how passionate you are about the space, and I've really enjoyed the conversation, and hope to have many more.
Can I throw one little self-serving statement out there?
Of course, go for it.
Anyone who needs any type of support, whether it's financial or legal, whatever, in the industry, go to people who know the industry. I get very frustrated uh, as an attorney in this space when I see people doing deals with really good attorneys who have no freaking idea what this business is all about. Because you support system has to understand the business if
Mm,
you're going to do this. So align yourself with people. Obviously, it's self-serving because I love doing the legal on these things, but align yourself with people that understand the business because it's one thing to be able to do a good financial analysis in a vacuum or do reps and warranties and indemnifications in a vacuum, whatever. But if you don't understand the business, you're not going to negotiate or craft a good deal or a
mm.
good financial backbone. You have to understand the industry.
Great, good advice, and I think they know who to call.
1-800-LBE lawyer. That's 1-800-LBE law.
Brilliant. Okay, all right. Well, thanks, Wendy. Like I say, really enjoyed it, and hopefully speak again soon.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye bye.